Hello from wherever you are, and welcome to Let's Play Games. I'm John McFarland, Adult Services Librarian for Nashville Public Libraries, and I hope you'll join me in learning or rediscovering some of the more common and uncommon games out there. Now, we go back to my favorite game, Mahjong. We taught the core basic concepts of how it moves, how you deal, and how you work with a tile-based game. We're going to add a little bit more complexity this time. We're going to throw in some dragons. Let's get stuck in. So, before we get started today, let's kind of review. We've got 3 suits, the dots, the characters, and the bamboo sticks, 1 through 9. They all go in order. 1 and 9 being at the end are called terminals, 2 through 8 symbols. You are going to draw along a wall that we'll construct here in a minute, and the purpose is to gather groups of melds and pair, one single pair, into a valid hand. There are different types of valid hands. We're going to add some more today because of this important piece. The dragons. We have 3 dragons that automatically throw some fun in. We've got our green, red, and white dragons. So part of the reason why they're important is because if you have 3 of the same color dragons, that's a valid hand by itself. Just you need 3 dragons of the same color. We're also going to talk about opening versus closing your hand today, because the last time you couldn't steal a piece, this time you can. But I will say, there's a catch. If you open your hand, some hands don't become valid. You can't do the resheet or reach if you have an open hand. It remains closed. All simples is technically fair game, but it's lesser point worthy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this to our pile. Remember, it's a tile-based game. We are going to just add this in, and we'll shuffle it up. All right. And now last time we had a little complex, but what we're going to do is for this, there will be 15 stacks for each player. So hold on a minute, I'll get it set up. Now that we have this set up, last time we had a specific dealer, and therefore their side was a little larger on this wall. Well, they're all even. So how do we determine where to break this wall? This is where our friendly dice come into play. So what I'm going to do, I rolled a 6. So from here, I'm going to count out spaces, and that's where we break the wall. And we start counterclockwise like we did before. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So our opposite side, what is our west wind, is going to break their wall. And they're going to start from the right hand, moving over to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And just squeeze that one. Now this time we're going to be getting 14 tiles. 14 is our main, and that will also happen a lot. It's usually no big deal. So what you're going to do for this is 2 stacks on each side. And with this, you're inevitably going to have a point where you hit the corner of a wall. Well, what you do here is just go ahead and take from this wall and develop it out. So it'll be these 2 stacks, 2 stacks, 2 stacks, 8, 12. So notice how much of the wall is already going to be gone. But that's part of this game is, and important here, at this point you're going to take one piece. That will give you 13. Because a valid hand is going to be 14. And so therefore, I'm going to go and give the dealer that 14th piece so we know what our first draw is. Now, importantly, we're going to have a dead wall. It's some pieces that will not be used no matter what during the course of the game. And it's going to be where we set up right here. That is, like I talked about last time, our Dora indicator. So that's going to be our 6 of bamboo is our Dora for this hand. And we're going to stop at 5. So this will be our stopping point right here. I'll go and break that so you can see it. Last episode, I talked about the con. If you have 4 of a kind. With this, you are going to pull from that 4 tile space closest to you. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to take another second for me to get these pieces organized, and then I will show you exactly what we're working with. Appreciate the patience. Now let's look at each of our players' respective hands to see what we're working with. We've got one of our dragons, not bad. An 8, which isn't connected. A pair, which will be nice if we get ourselves a 2. 6 and 8, so we're waiting on that 7. We do have options here with this 1, 2, 3. Also this 1, 2, 4. We've got the beginnings of a hand. I'm gonna, when we start talking about the new valid hands we can use, that will be pretty important to how this game develops. So now we've got 1 dragon, 7 and 8, 3, 4, set. Basically a whole bunch of connected ones, just needing that last little piece. So you've also got some good options here. Forgot to put these up as well. So we've got 2 dragons here, start, 7, 9, we need an 8, 1 completed set, and a pair. Not bad. Pair, still waiting, 3, 4, 5, it's connected, so the 1 and the 7 become kind of extraneous, and these pieces which are currently of no help. So at this point, you've got to start thinking, what hand do I want to go for? 1 second, take a step back, and I'll show you all sorts of new hands that you can try. So last time I talked about Mahjong. I want to lead you to the next evolution of the game, Hool, which loosely translates to watching the pot. We saw the evolution not just of a collection, but of trying to make melds, or small groups together. This was one of the first big evolutions we saw towards a rummy-style game, and Hool is known as probably the biggest ancestor of all rummy-style games, of which Mahjong can claim to be a descendant, just like rummy. Like I referred to, you've got to figure out your plan. Once you start looking, what are you going to go for? So there's a few more types of valid hands that I want to talk about. Last time we had our completely closed hand, 1 piece away, Rishi. All simples, so none of either a 1 or a 9. For all simples, dragons are out 2. So you can't have dragons as a part of your hand. You can't have ones or nines as any part of the hand. Now, let's add in the fun. Dragons. 3 of each dragon. So 3 reds, or 3 whites, or 3 greens. Valid hand. Just on its own. And you can steal that piece. So for example, over there, if there's a green dragon that pops up and it gets discarded, they're snatching it up. They automatically have a valid hand. You've also got all triplets, which nobody's really anywhere close to. That hand's worth 3 versus a rishi, which is just worth 1. Again, we'll talk more about the scoring system later. You are going to have a lot more difficulty getting all triplicates, especially because it's one of our first hands that we see here that is completely closed. If you have it open, it doesn't count. You wouldn't have a valid hand unless you had a combination of something. We also now have the option for a straight. So if you have 1 through 9 of all the same suit in order, that is 3 of the 4 melds you need and doesn't count towards the pair. That one's harder to get. It can technically be open, but it's worth less being open. This is where sometimes you have to make those decisions of, am I going to be able to get it myself? Am I close already? No one here in these draws are particularly close, except maybe right here has a little bit of the option. They could get some character help over there. Also, we have what are called flushes. So if you have all of, let's say there were all these numbers and then some dragons, that would be a valid hand based on it's all the same plus some sort of terminal dragons and later on wins will be valid. You also have a full flush, which is probably worth the most at this point, where it's all pieces of the same suit. No dragons, and if you're doing it off of numbers, there's no characters if you're doing dots, there's no bamboo if you're doing dots, etc. on down the line. So now this is where we're doing this just a couple at a time, where you want to start building a hand that works for you and for you as a player. So remember I drew this first piece, so there's 14. I don't have a valid hand. By the way, a completed hand on the first draw is worth a whole lot of points. Hence why it's so rare, because it hardly ever happens. There's also, if you get off of your first draw, that's a valid hand. It's easier to start couching these things under specific categories, and so you don't have to memorize them all. You just have to look for the most common ones and the biggest patterns. So let's look here. We've got 1, 2, this 1, 2, 3, this 4 is kind of extraneous. Pair of 3s, the 8's kind of extraneous. Since I have this dragon, I'll wait and see if it's later discard fodder. Move these dice out of the way. So we'll just, for now, this 8 is the furthest away from anything else. So here's where our thievery rules come into play. We have where the person to the right, the next player sequentially, if they can create a sequence off of that 8, they can take the piece. The only reason they might not take the piece are if 2 things happen. 1, another player can win off of that piece. Then you can't steal it, the other person has won, the hand is over. Or having a triplet takes priority. Triplets are harder to get, triplets end up being worth more. So it has a priority structure here. So they've got an 8 here, but they can't make a triplicate. Having pairs is not able to steal because you have to be able to create a meld. And there's the 7, 8, and 9, so it could finish for over here, but they're not to the player's immediate right, they can't take it. So this is where sometimes you're looking not only for what your opponents discard, but what you're discarding as well, which will come into so much importance later, I promise you. Also, one fun little yaku or all of these valid hands is there's a way, just one way, where you can create all pairs. So the 7 pairs hand is exactly what it says on the tin. It's 7 individual pairs. So if you start off with 4 or 5 pairs from the get-go, you may want to try and go for that. But because you can't steal pieces unless you're creating a sequence, it has to stay closed. This is where it can get a little frustrating sometimes when you're waiting on the right pair or the one pair. So for here, I'm presuming they're going for everything contains a terminal maybe, or holding out hope for the dragons. Seeing kind of where it goes because I don't have anything really big to go towards. So now we're gonna go ahead and take this next piece. 6, that creates their 6, 7, 8. So now they're looking pretty good and they're trying to figure out what they wanna go for. I got a whole bunch of sequences at play here. They're not gonna discard these circles just in case. They're not gonna discard this, they're not gonna discard this, this. So now it's the 5, 7 or the dragon. And you gotta think, do I wanna discard this and completely get rid of the dragon possibility? Or do I wanna risk it with one of these pieces being able to be stolen? On my end, the safer discard is this dragon, just because of how rare it is. And yes, they have the green dragon over there, but it's still relatively unlikely. So we're gonna continue on our pathway where, all right, we've got another 5. So I'm gonna get rid of one of these here. And can anybody create an 8? They can't even take it because, so it unintentionally becomes a safe discard. You're typically not gonna know over the course of a game, which is why you sometimes have to worry about what's the proper way to discard. So that 6 here becomes actually kind of helpful because now if you get an 8, this 9 becomes kind of useless unless you're going for something specific with it or trying to have multiple of one set. But from here, I know that the 8's been discarded here. So this is where you're paying attention to what your opponent is doing next. If I've discarded the 8, I have to have 7, 8, 9 already. And I can't use that with the rules that we're gonna talk about next episode. This becomes massively important. So that 9 is a safe tile to discard. No one can create a triplicate, so we'll go on. 8, which is not really help. And no one can create a pattern here. So now this is where, again, the game moves kind of quickly. Pair of 5s, which is nice. So I'm gonna discard that 7. 7 can't do anything. Can't do anything there, can't do anything there. So typically, as you're just sitting here, you will be paying attention. So this 9's no help to me. Here's our first opportunity to steal. They have 2 9s here. And in theory, if they had 7, 8, 9, or sorry, 7, 8, and needed that 9, they could also pick it up that way. But what they're gonna do is they're gonna take that piece. So they're gonna say, hey, I've got this piece. And now you're gonna take it. And typically this is where you would reveal open parts of the hand. You're gonna actually indicate who you got the piece from. So I'm gonna mark it here. So this tells me, sitting here, that the person to my left is the one that got the hand. If it was the person across from you, it would look like this, to where it's pointing that direction. If it was the person sitting here, it would look like this. This is just an easy way for you to notate who helped you get that piece. But now notice that they don't have a completed hand. They have to discard something. So notice that red dragon's already been discarded, so that's probably not gonna work. So they're gonna discard that. This also, by the way, helps account for the fact that they only have 1 discard, but 1 piece was taken. So that way it helps a little bit with the symmetry. 5 and the 6, so I'm gonna discard this 4 here because I think it's a safe piece and it looks like it is. So typically if it's closer to the middle, it's more likely to be stolen in a sequence. So sometimes it can be risky, but if now all of a sudden I'm looking at, okay, I've got all of these circles here, that might evolve into something. We've got our white dragon. We'll go ahead and discard here. And then a 6, which actually helps us here. I'll just discard this 1 because it's safe, because I want to see what my hand will look like. 3, which completes here. And then the 1, the 2, 6, 7. Now I'm running into kind of a problem though. Notice how it's not all simples, and it can't be all simples now, period, because I've claimed that piece. I can't discard this. It's opened. So now I'm looking at, well, a valid hand can be where I have at least 1 of every terminal as a part of my sequences, okay, but now that 6 becomes kind of difficult because I need a 9. So what I'm going to do is say, okay, that's what I'm going to go for. Going to hope for the best, and we'll take away that 6. So from here, it's all about the pieces that you are discarding and where it goes from there and how you're going to potentially build a hand. So my 2, I like the idea of a triplicate better anyways, and no 2s have been discarded yet. For over here, there's one of the 9s we needed, so they're going to keep that. Now you have to really think about what to discard and what hand you're going for. So notice how it keeps evolving piece by piece by piece. So I'm going to take another step back. I want to show you a little bit more about the history of this game, and then I'll show you how this one shakes out, because I have a hunch it's going to look real interesting. Our next step of the journey is Hool, which will start to seem rather familiar because there would be 4 sets of 3 suits, ace through 10 or ace through 9 in some instances. And this was a game that really we don't have a lot of information to exactly how it was played because people did not make a contemporary account of it, aside from the fact that it was hard to play. And people liked it, but they didn't like it as much as Mahjong. So it became a close cousin with some of the core rules and was probably played with similar style pieces. But it was slightly different and came first, so I wanted to make mention of it. But more on how we continued evolving later. Let's keep on going, because I'm curious to see if we can get all the way to the end without a valid hand on this one. So notice we've got to really decide what we're doing here. They've got their pairs, so that's probably going to stay as is. The 1 and the 2, are they going to go for terminals? That becomes kind of unhelpful. So let's go and discard that 9. Let's say they're going for all simples. No dragons, they've already been discarded. And we'll keep on going. See, another 3 gets added in, so I'm going to keep on shedding those number pieces. And they can't do anything off that. This is kind of the fun of the game, where sometimes you end up getting the exact same piece, or worse, a piece you need off of something else. It's where like discarding that 9 earlier is really kind of hurting here. I know that the 6 is becoming pretty practically unavailable, so I'm starting to be a little worried if I'm this player. White dragon, there's already been 1 discarded and it doesn't really help. So we'll keep going. This is another reason, and there's the 6, 7, 8 I needed. So I'm going to go ahead and chuck this 1. No one can claim it, so we're good there. So right now, we're starting to get to where it's a little more complex because I'm talking about it so sequentially. I'll go and get rid of that 2 there now that I've made that 3, 4, 5. Where now you're getting into where people are looking for requisite pieces and trying to build their hand as fast as possible. Now, it kind of hurts that we've now given up that pair. The 9 here, you know that 9 is probably a safe discard. 1, because there are 3 9s here, so they can't take it off of here. And the odds that they're going to have a 9 that they need is rather low compared to if I wanted to get rid of that 2 there. Because we know that, based on there, that 1 and the 3, that 2 is going to be mighty valuable if they want to open their hand. So now let's keep going. 9, which is no help. A 7, which is no help, and nobody can take a triplicate off of that. All right. Oh. Sorry, trying to be a little more succinct there. Yep, 7 no help. 6. Now you got to think about what are you really going to do here? You could go for triplicates, but now I'm playing for seeing how close I can get my hand to complete. 6, 7, 8. Now we're doing pretty well. I've got my pair. I've at least got my 1, 2, 3. That 5's kind of extraneous. I'm going to drop that 1. The dragon's kind of sitting there, but I want to like hold out hope. There's the 1 that's also of no help here. The 4, now this person's almost able to go for a flush here. And they're really hoping for that green dragon. So now you've got to make your decision. I can go for a basically flush style hand. And actually, funnily enough, if I take this naturally in our full version is actually a valid hand. So I want to touch on that. It's 2 triplicates of the same character, same variety. So that this person doesn't even need the dragons anymore. So they can have their valid hand, and now they're looking for, and we're gonna go ahead, this would be covered in a later episode as a valid hand, but since we've got it naturally, it's a perfect time to talk about it. So this person can say, I am 1 away, and I need one of a couple things. I need another 5, I need an 8, and a green dragon. So this person is going to reach. They're saying before we get to the end of that wall that I am going to have the piece that I need. All of that is the key part right there. So now they would lay a point stick or point indicator. We will talk about scoring in a future episode. And now everyone who's playing is going to get real nervous. Why? Hands closed. People don't know what it is. So now we're kind of going, what's it looking like here? 3, which is of no help. If I wanted to, I could open my hand and take it like here. So that's kind of, there's a small chance that I could get a straight. And I think we'll go for that. I'm going to mark 3 I got from them, and we'll just go ahead and get rid of this dragon since we know it's safe. So now here's a couple things we need. We're going to need our 4 and a 9, and we'd have a straight. We've got 2 pairs, so I've got something in reserve. So now we've got a pretty fully developed hand with 2 players. And the 9, which is, again, not really helpful to us, so we'll go ahead and continue discarding that. And it's not one of the pieces they need. So the 1, and immediately, if it's not the piece you need, you discard it. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter the function of it. You discard it. 8, which to us, here's where we run into the problem. It's no help to us. So for us, we're not going to be interested in that. It may be safer to discard, and this is where sometimes the discard pile can be mean to you. This person can't take the 8, so you would think it's safe. You'd also think this is safe. So for the sake of conversation, I'll keep this one, we'll discard this. We'll let it keep going for just a little while longer. The moment that an 8 is discarded, this is over. So our 7, which is kind of helpful here, so we'll break up that 2. And no one can take it. Another dragon, 5, which is of no help. And no one can take it, so we'll keep going on. Here's our 1, which is going to be helpful here. And this is where we're going to discard the 8. At this point, the player over there has a completed hand by saying wrong. It does not open their hand. It is still a fully concealed hand. But you're going to mark, and this is where the person will show out what they have. They have these 2 matching sets in a closed hand, pair, and 2 sequences. This is where a hand can sequentially go and how fast it can develop, because notice they mostly just got rid of extraneous stuff and they happen to have pretty close, and it worked out for them really well. Now, I was kind of hoping we would get to the end and there would be nobody with a valid hand. At this point, no one else is sitting 1 away. This is where we talk about tempi. This is our ready, waiting. If we get to the end, and again, we will talk about scoring in a future episode, I want to make sure the concepts are here first. The way that it will work is the people who are in tempi or ready, it doesn't have to be valid. As long as they are 1 away from a hand, it doesn't have to be anything spectacular. It's just about being ready. So sometimes if you're getting close to the end, you will intentionally throw away stuff that you might have wanted because you know you're not going to make it in time, but you can have a ready hand. The people who are not in ready will give points to the people who are ready, which can be a minimum of 0, no one can be ready, or all 4 can be ready, which no points are exchanged. But the people who are out will give subsequent points away to those who are ready. But at this point, they will have to, as they were the person that dealt in, that player will get the points. This person will give them all the points. So this is where you don't want to deal in, because if you are dealing in, you will have to eat all of the point loss, be it 1,000 points or be it 16,000, because it can range. If it was self-drawn, so say they had drawn that 8, at that point, it would have been distributed equally among the players. So it changes the game slightly for what you're discarding, how you're discarding, and why you're discarding. So take a step back. I've got one more thing to tell you about the history of the game before we go. I've talked about these win pieces a little bit, and they used to not exist, or they used to be more in the sense of directionals as a concept, or kings. And part of the reason we have the standard deck is because of an American diplomat who basically brought back home a board that he really enjoyed playing. And it used to have king pieces of various locations. The reason we don't have this is because of a rebellion. There was a Chinese rebellion somewhere in the 1860s where they referred to each other as various kings as a way to organize their rebellion and also be leaders of it. And they referred to as the pieces. After that rebellion was crushed, they changed it to the wins, so that way it couldn't be replicated. So sometimes you have some really interesting things to lead to small changes in a game. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for tuning in. Notice how these concepts build upon each other. We are going to add even more next time. The wins. See you next time.